Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2 and I am back for Season 5. Going to be making a ton of build videos this season, so make sure to subscribe if you're interested, like the video if you find it helpful, etc. But today we're starting out with a leveling build for Sorcerer, which is not only the best build for Sorc, but it is just overall one of the best leveling builds in the game. It has been for multiple seasons, and it has just gotten buffed like a tremendous amount. It already was absolutely insane, and it's going to be nearly twice as good for leveling. So this is definitely the build that you want to start out with. Sorc this season seems to be a really good option. There's a ton of different builds that you can go for. I am super excited for Sorc. I think it is a really great choice for this season. I'm going to be posting a ton of Sorc builds, so be on the lookout for that. But for leveling, by far and away the best choice is Firewall, and then you add Hydra onto that, which got a ton of buffs, not only last season, but also this season, and you're just going to absolutely annihilate everything. Build is pretty straightforward, so let's just get into it. The entirety of the build will be posted over on Mobalytics, so I'll have a link to that down in the description. And of course, if anything changes, I will be updating this, so feel free to check that out. One of the nice things about this being on the website is that you can look at the skill tree, and then you can enable a leveling path, and you can just see exactly how all the skill points are spent, and you can very easily just copy and paste it. One of the benefits of this build relative to others is that you don't really need any gear for it to work. It just works really great at a baseline, but like I was saying, it actually recently got buffed significantly. Firewall got a massive buff, Hydra got a massive buff, and the combustion passive also got a buff, so burning damage is just absolutely goated. And there's also a new Hydra temper, which is going to ramp the build even further. So this is just going to absolutely annihilate. All the gameplay that I've shown is prior to all of these buffs. So with these buffs, you're just going to zoom. Stay tuned to the channel because I will have a endgame build posted for Sorc once you guys get into endgame. But one of the starter sets for Sorc is going to be giving you a lot of chain lightning gear. So I'm probably going to start out with the chain lightning build, but you can use this for leveling obviously, and it's going to be great. All right, starting out with the skill points. There isn't like a guaranteed best way to do this, but this is just how I like to spend them. But keep in mind there are a couple things that you could swap out based on preference. When it comes to the basic skill, I like to go for Firebolt. The reason being is they removed the movement speed off of Arc Lash. This doesn't exist anymore, and Firebolt helps with your single target damage, with this node giving you 25% increased burning damage. Later on, you'll have enough mana generation to where you don't really need Firebolt anymore, but it is kind of a 25% damage bonus, and it also helps with the combustion key passive for another 4%, so it's decent for damage output, help with your single target. Later on though, once you have good enough mana, you won't need it. For now, we're just going to put 1 point to Fireball. We need this because we're going to be using the Fireball enchant, so anytime we kill enemies, they just blow up in huge cascading AoE, which is really nice. Early on, you could level this up while you're just like in these early levels to have some damage there, but later on, we're not going to have the points there because it's not going to help the enchant. So for now, I'll just go Devastation and Elemental Dominance for a little bit of damage because this will scale our Firewall damage. But again, super early levels. If you want to min-max, just put some points into Fireball. Now we're going to go into Teleport, grab the movement speed of Teleport, put 1 point into Flame Shield just to have that immunity there. While leveling, your survivability is pretty good, so this is kind of optional, to be honest with you. And then I'm just going to go into Glass Cannon here for simply just more damage. Now we have access to Hydra. Hydra is really nice because this summoned Hydra node got buffed to 100% base damage, pretty sure. And there's also new Hydra temper to where the Hydras have more heads, so they're just going to be doing way more damage for you. And it's also just another source of burn that you can add onto the build pretty much for free. You don't really lose anything by adding Hydra, and it is massively going to increase your damage output. Where you want to put the points now is kind of up to you. I'm going to go Glass Cannon and then 1 point to Elemental Attunement just so I have a chance to reset the cooldown on my teleport really, just for some more movement speed. Now we have access to Firewall, which is our main bread and butter with the build. But once you have everything set up, Firewall and Hydra kind of do comparable damage. Firewall is really great because this node, 25% increased burning damage. It has really high base damage. It's 200 something percent now, which is crazy starting off leveled at level 0. But the Mage's Firewall makes it to where enemies enter the Firewall and then they continue to burn perpetually. And within these 3 seconds, they should die. So they just have to hit the Firewall 1 time. You can kind of place them behind you and just keep running, and everything will kind of just die behind you. And then, you know, once you're level 15 or whatever it is to get your enchant, you can just slap on Fireball, and then once you kill one enemy, the Fireball will, you know, kill everything. So that is why the build works really well right out the gate. And we just want to max our Firewall out, and then we get Fiery Surge, really great for mana generation, 45% increase from killing a burning enemy, and Firewall doesn't cost a ton of mana, and you have really high mana gen by default, so this helps you out a ton. Then we can grab some survivability. Warmth got buffed, so it is just a ridiculous amount of healing. Pair this with some life per hit on gear, and you're pretty much invincible with this build, which is also a really great thing about it. And then for our last skill, I really like to grab Ice Blades. This last skill is honestly optional. You could go into Frost Nova or Ice Armor if you prefer. The reason that I like Ice Blades is because it reduces its own cooldown quite a bit every time that it attacks. It counts as an ice skill, which is really good for one of our legendaries, which we'll talk about in a second. And it also has decent vulnerable application. But again, if you prefer something else, feel free to go for that. An added benefit is that it scales up Conjuration Mastery, which is really good, just giving us damage, movement speed, and that also works with Hydra as well. Now we have access to Combustion, which is going to be buffed to 60% increased damage now, which is really nice. And then we have multiple sources of burning, so that also is going to increase our damage. So this is just a massive, massive pickup for us. Then we can finish out Conjuration Mastery. Now you just have a whole bunch of skill points to kind of just go into passives, do whatever you want. You could go into survivability, or you could go into more damage. So real quick, I'm going to go into some survivability. Protection is really nice with one of our legendaries, Conceited Aspect, but it's also just good for survivability. Mana Shield is real nice for some damage reduction, and I believe this even got buffed too, which is quite nice. Inner Flame just straight up just extra damage. We're pretty much permanently healthy. And Hydra and Firewall are both Pyromancy skills, so that is quite nice. Then we can grab points into Soulfire for just a little bit of extra damage. Isn't anything crazy. And then we can go into Shimmering Teleport for some damage reduction there with Teleport. Max out Elemental Dominance here for a little bit of damage. And then we have a few points, so you could either decide to scale Hydra damage, but a lot of the damage is based on the burning actually, so leveling it up isn't too good, but if you feel like your Hydra is doing really good damage, you could level that up. I'm going to go into Ice Blade's attack speed just so it reduces its cooldown more, and then I'll just put the rest of the points into Teleport just so it has a lower cooldown. When it comes to your second enchant, you have two options. Feel free to use whichever. I like to use Hydra because you spawn a lot of extra Hydras, and our Hydras do pretty good damage, like I said 1,000 times, so I think it just helps with your single target damage. A lot of people opt for Firewall. Usually when I use it while leveling, I don't see it proc too much. We don't have much lucky hit, so I'm not a huge fan of it. It's really just up to preference, though. Hydra enchant helps scale your Conjuration Mastery, which is also nice. Feel free to use whatever you want to use, really. I prefer Hydra, obviously. When it comes to stats on gear, a lot of stuff is not updated on for the Season 5 changes, so I'm just going to show you guys the Mobalytics link that I have here. And again, if I test stuff and decide that some stuff is a little bit better, I will update it here, so definitely make sure to reference the Mobalytics link. When it comes to legendaries that you want to prioritize and focus on getting early, I think Aspect of Engulfing Flames on Amulet is probably your best bet. It's going to give you 45% increased burning damage to enemies below 50%, so that averages like 22% overall damage. But while leveling, you're going to do so much raw damage that you're actually going to benefit from the 100% a lot of the time if you do enough damage to them where it basically counts as them dying. So it's really just going to help your clear speed out. This one's kind of optional. It could be conceded instead if you prefer that, but I think personally this is what I'm going to do. One thing that's really good for mana is going to be Aspect of Elemental Acuity. This is a new one. This could be Prodigy Aspect instead if you get that early, but the benefit of this is it's going to give you mana regeneration, and if you use a Shock, Frost skill, and a Pyromancy skill, for 10 seconds you'll get 120% mana gen, which is just going to give you infinite mana by default. Your Shock skill is Teleport, which is on like a 10-second cooldown or something like that, so you'll pretty much have this all the time. Pyromancy is Firewall, and your Frost skill is going to be Ice Blades, which is also on a low cooldown because it reduces its own cooldown. So that is really good. Serpentine Aspect just gives you one extra Hydra, so that's just straight up extra damage. Like I said, Conceited Aspect is just 25% damage all the time. There's one new aspect that could be good. It's called Firestarter. I have not really looked into it. I'm probably going to try it out, and I'll update this if I think that it's pretty good. It just does flat damage. I just don't know how much flat damage it does. So I'll have to try that out and see if it ends up being worth it. But a lot of our damage is damage over time, so this wouldn't really get scaled all that well. One aspect that is probably decent is Creeping Death, but this relies on doing CC to enemies. Same with Aspect of Control, and I like damage that is active all the time rather than circumstantial, and I didn't want to build too much into crowd control, etc. This is more of a late game thing, in my opinion. It would help with your bossing damage a little bit, though. For survivability aspects and just utility, Juggernaut is good for armor capping you, concentration, just 25% DR all the time. Aspect of Might, 20% DR all the time. Flamewalkers is just going to give you some movement speed. I don't have any aspect on the weapon or the offhand because obviously you want to be constantly replacing those, but if I were to add an additional aspect, I would probably do Creeping Death, like I said, because it's just going to increase your damage against unstoppable enemies and staggered bosses. That can be a little bit helpful. There's also another aspect, Searing Wards, which will help you do a little bit of extra damage with your firewall with these small little missiles, but probably not enough to be worth losing a defensive aspect, to be honest. I'll have to try out Aspect of Inevitable Fate, but it's probably a little bit redundant while using the Fireball enchant, so I doubt this will be all that good. Intercom is just a little bit of extra damage, would help you with your bossing if you wanted. Same thing with Elements, just a little bit of raw damage. When it comes to the stats that you want on your gear, I would highly recommend prioritizing damage over time, and you can temper fire damage over time. This will scale both your Hydra and your Firewall, so it is just good for all things. On your weapons, for whatever reason this cleared, but getting life per hit is insanely good for survivability, and then just getting like damage over time and intelligence is really good. And then, like I said, for your temper, you want damage over time, but you can end up getting once you're in like World Tier 4 and you have access to 2 tempers, you can get Hydra cast have additional heads, if you're able to see this down here, and that is going to drastically increase the damage of your Hydra, so that is really good. But the build is using both Hydra and Firewall, so you don't want to lose a lot of Firewall damage to benefit Hydra, and vice versa. You don't want to scale your Firewall too much, because then your Hydra won't do as much damage. So really just want to prioritize getting damage over time, and then on like your rings, you could go for damage over time, life per hit, attack speed is pretty good, maximum HP obviously is good on gear, and try to like, you know, cap out your resistances, etc. And on your amulet, getting like int attack speed, cooldown reduction, that's pretty good. Obviously though, just prioritize like swapping out your weapon as much as humanly possible, because all of your damage scales off of your weapon. And, you know, for jewelry, just go for amethyst on your weapons, max HP, rubies, and then diamonds, so you can get some all resistance. But your resistances should be pretty okay. That's pretty much it for the build. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comments. When it comes to the Paragon board, like, I'd recommend swapping from this build to Chain Lightning probably around like 70 or so once you're in World Tier 4. I will be making a Chain Lightning build, so feel free to just check that out. But for the Paragon board, I would recommend just grabbing Burning Instinct really early, and then at this point you want to start trying to get some crit damage and intelligence on your gear, and that will scale up your burning damage quite a lot. I wouldn't really use this build all the way to level 100. You definitely could, and it's still going to be really, really fast for you, but ideally I think you want to go for Chain Lightning. And then when it comes to glyphs that you want early on, I guess like Adept is good for mastery skill damage, so your Firewall does more damage. I don't know. I haven't really min-maxed this for leveling, to be entirely honest with you. Torch is just going to increase your burning damage. That's pretty good early on, probably. Flame Feeder Glyph, same thing. Territorial is just some damage reduction. I don't know. I haven't really min-maxed this, to be honest with you guys. I kind of just went and grabbed Burning Instinct, and Tactician is okay because it buffs some damage reduction and some damage to burning enemies. But you can just follow this if you want. It isn't like a crazy min-max Paragon board. I haven't even finished it yet. I might do that. But that's pretty much it for the leveling build. As you can see here, strengths are, doesn't really require much gear. Very, very good ad clear. You just AoE blast everything. You're insanely tanky, like probably one of the tankiest leveling builds in the game. Just extremely fast. The only downside is your single target damage, but I think with all these buffs, your damage is roughly double what it used to be, and it was already like okay for single target. So if you're doing double the damage, I mean, that's pretty good. I think you'll kind of just nuke everything, and they've also nerfed a lot of stuff in game, so it should be perfectly fine. And it just isn't great in the end game, but I mean, getting up to level 100 is really, really easy, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal, and you can always just swap to something else. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you found it helpful, and I will see you guys later. Make sure to subscribe for a ton of other build videos, as I will be posting a lot this season. And thanks for watching. See ya.